On this episode of Geek Dad Life, we're going to review the new McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Superman. Hello everybody and welcome to Geek Dad Life. Today we're going to be reviewing one of the first DC Universe figures from McFarlane Toys. That's right, it's a changing of the guard. After nearly 20 years of Mattel holding the DC figure license, it has now been taken over by McFarlane Toys, as well as Spin Master for the more child-focused line. But McFarlane is picking up the collector line, and today we're going to be looking at one of their first Superman figures from their DC Multiverse wave. It was just announced last week officially, even though we knew they picked up the license last year. And they're already in stores. Like, I picked this one up in the wild at my local Target. They had some of the Bruce Timm animated style figures, but I had to pass on those. They just not quite there. I think the DC collectibles line just did them better. So looking at the box art, I think it's pretty cool. This Superman is based on the Action Comics 1000 cover, and I think it does a pretty good job with that. It shows some of the other figures you can collect in the back there. I put out some of the official pictures released by McFarlane Toys as part of their press release. Out of all of them, I think I really want to get the Batgirl, Batman, possibly the Nightwing, and that's probably going to do it for this first wave of toys. I've been collecting DC figures from Hasbro to Mattel for pushing, 30 years. And I'm not 100% sold on diving fully into the McFarlane DC figures. And a big part of that is going to be how I feel about this Superman figure. The packaging says we have 22 moving parts, or I guess points of articulation. When I picked this thing off the shelf, it was the only Superman, or this version of Superman, left there, but the paint looked pretty good. All right, let's break down how I'm going to review this figure and all figures going forward on Geek Dad Life. We're going to have 6 factors by which they will be graded. Each is up to 5 points in each category. That first category is going to be paint. The second one, articulation. The third one, quality control. The fourth one, accessories. The fifth one, packaging, and the sixth one, fun factor, which should hopefully lead to a score of 24 or better, which I'm going to deem shelf-worthy. Is this toy shelf-worthy? Meaning, regardless of how you feel about it, is it so good that it needs a place on a shelf somewhere in your collection? And a 24 or better means that in each category, you're averaging 4 or better. And out of, a possible 5 points in each category, I think that's a good place to put it. All right, let's open this thing up. I cut the 2 pieces of tape that are on the top. It was very tight to open the packaging, so it's not as collector-friendly as, say, the Marvel Legends and Black Series figures by Hasbro. Some people like being able to put it back in the box. To me, I don't care as much. I don't display my figures packaged or boxed. I like to have them out. I like to have them posed. That's part of the fun for me. But I do think packaging is a part of it. That's why it is one of the a big part of any toy or action figure. So it is going to be a graded category for my review. It has a card with, again, that cover of Action Comics 1000, and a flight stand there in the back, which counts as one of his accessories. And we got our soups, and the only thing holding him in is that little bit of plastic there. It is a rubber cape, and it has 2 extra hand accessories. I'm going to use my guitar string cutter there to cut that off to make sure we don't accidentally damage the figure. And it's in there pretty tight. I always get a little nervous pulling them out in this situation in case it may cause some damage, which is something that happens from time to time if the figure's really, really stiff or if the plastic's brittle. Thankfully, in this case, it is not. And in hand, it feels really solid. It feels like a really kind of premium quality figure when compared to the Mattel collector figures. This one feels heftier. Definitely more in line with maybe a NECA figure than the Mattel ones, which I think is pretty good considering this figure is, $19.99 on the shelf. Testing out its articulation, the head is a little gummy, like the movement's a little gummy. Like you can kind of position it a little bit if you push it, but it kind of just wants to kind of snap back in place. If you can kind of notice here, it kind of springs back into just the, forward-facing position. That's a little bit oily, which just might be, from the production here. The arm joints are kind of like click in place. You just have that extra shoulder joint. Kind of reminds me of Marvel Legends. You have an ab crunch and kind of swivel, which I think works pretty good. You have the trunks that kind of like external to the actual kind of hip function of the figure. You have double jointed knees, which again I question the efficacy of that. But for maybe people that like extreme posing, that's cool. I kind of would rather have maybe a swivel type of cut in the actual boot, which this does not have. You do have ankle movements rolling back side to side. You also have toe articulation, which again reminds me of Marvel Legends or the original Toy Biz Marvel Legends. But it's not it seems sculpt wise, it's not over the top like those Marvel Legends figures were. But overall, it's a little tight, but not overly tight, not to the point where it feels like I might break it. Not a fan of the cape so much. I'd much rather prefer cloth, but still, it's not bad, all things considered. Something about the knees here that's like slightly shiny. So I don't know if it was cast in a different plastic. It's something you'll pick up more on the camera here, but even just kind of glancing at it, the knees are shiny, which I don't think was intentional. I don't know if it was the paint. It's probably something more in line with the plastic that they used. I don't know if that's a unique problem to mine or something that's just a production problem overall. Now we're going to try and stand him up here. This table that I'm using is not the most stable one, but I think an action figure being able to pass the will it stand test is an important part of the engineering of the toy. And I think it passes with flying colors here without even using the stand that it comes with. All right, let's do some comparisons here. I'm going to compare it to one of the more recent Mattel collectibles figures from the end of their DC line. This is their kind of Kingdom Come Superman. You can definitely see the size difference, and that's by design. The Mattel figures were of 6-inch scale, and the McFarlane ones are the 7-inch scale. Having them next to each other, the McFarlane one looks a lot better. It definitely again feels more aligned with. He's jealous of how good he looks. With the NECA kind of feeling quality, where the Mattel one just looks very plasticky. Even though I really like that figure. The McFarlane Toy Superman definitely feels classier and nicer than the Mattel one. Let's bring in what I still consider the best Superman figure. Oops. The Superpowers Superman from the Kenner Superpowers line from 1984. And, out of all the Supermans that have come since, I still consider the Superpowers one to be the best version of Superman. That's why I have the Superpowers Hall of Justice behind this one. But I think, overall, if you're trying to have an iconic-looking Superman, I think this one does a pretty good job. I wish there was a yellow S on the back of the cape. Again, I wish it was a cloth cape, but maybe that's just my bias for the, Kenner Superpowers figure. But overall, I think, they really captured that iconic Superman look. Even though it's based off of, a modern cover, I think it is a very timeless Superman look and feel. All right, now it's time to dive into some of the accessories that come with this figure. So it has a card, a collectible card, a kind of a file card, which is fun. And it comes with a flight stand, which is really cool. I can't recall, off the top of my head, any of like the standard Superman figures from the Mattel line coming with a flight stand. So really cool. The card's nice. Thick card stock, if this is your thing. To me, it's just kind of, fodder. But it's fun that they put the data file in there. I think toys, even if they're adult collectibles, action figures should still have a bit of fun in them. So I think the file card is a neat add-on here, and it does count as an accessory. I'm going to count it as an accessory. And yeah, let's get this flight stand open here. Again, I think this is where the engineering of the toy is really important, and the flight stand is like multi-use, so you actually have just a straight up figure stand. So it has a little peg that you can put your Superman figure on. So that's awesome. As someone who has bought many action figure stands for his figures so they don't fall over, it's neat that this one not only has a flight stand, but it also doubles as an action figure stand. So again, really cool. Again, harkens back to the Toy Biz Legends days. It used to come with flight stands, and so yeah, a really neat ad here for the figure. So first, going to try out the figure stand version or configuration of this accessory, and just going to get him set up here. It's pretty easy, kind of keeping the same pose that I had before. This is just trying it out for the first time. I'm not a pose connoisseur by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just showing how quickly I can kind of get it to work. And yeah, as a figure stand works well. It's kind of large for a figure stand, especially if you're on a shelf and shelf space is tight, but it works, keeps the figure upright, and even with a little bit of shaking, it's still holding on, which is good. All right, now let's put it in flight stand mode. Pretty easy, just clicks into place here, and that's it. And then you have your little latch to hook around his waist or his leg or however you want to use it. For me, I'm going to kind of put it on the waist to kind of have kind of a static, kind of floating in the air pose is what I'm going to go for. The Supes fits in pretty easily, and the cape does kind of go out a little bit with the arm behind, but again, it's kind of in a flying pose when you're using the flight stand, so it kind of works in the cape's favor. That's kind of flowing out a little bit, which is pretty neat. I have to do a little bit of posing here. I think I've got kind of where I want it to be. And again, I'm not a posing expert by any means, but yeah, I think the flight stand works really well. Like, it's pretty well balanced. Like, I'm moving it around without supporting the figure at all, and it's in no danger of toppling over. Is it a little wobbly? Sure, but I think it works just fine and looks really good. The hands swap out really easy. It was really smooth. The ball joint makes I think a little awkward in terms of the way the hand looks. And I wish, I had two closed fists. I kind of have this kind of half open kind of hand, where I wish I really had like two fists and then two like straight up flying hands. I don't know if that's kind of a reuse issue or what, but overall, better hand selection would have been nice, but cool to get some different hand options regardless. Does that ding the accessories? Possibly, but again, this is, in terms of like a straight up retail release of Superman, we haven't, to my memory, had one that had an awesome flight stand like this as like, the main consumer collectible line. All right, now it's time to tally up our point totals from our 6 categories to see if this figure is truly shelf worthy. And we'll start off with paint. I think this figure has really good paint. Like, comparing it to the Mattel figure, like, it looks like a premium quality action figure, and at $19.99 retail, I think that's a feat in of itself. I like the kind of shininess of the Superman logo, so going to give 5 points to paint. Next up is articulation. I think this was a case of maybe overdoing it. I think some of the cut lines kind of take away from the overall appearance of the figure. But still, you can get it in just about any pose that you'd want your Superman figure to get to, save for probably one of the most iconic ones. Even the cover it's supposed to be representing can't quite get it to kind of put his hands on his hips. And without the two fists, you can't even really recreate it that well anyhow. So I'm going to give it 3 points on articulation. Next up is QC. I didn't really have any problems with this figure, and I know QC is kind of hit or miss depending on what figure you get, but very little paint issues. Everything works as it should. It stands up as it should. It flies as it should. And the only thing I can kind of maybe ding it for is the kind of shiny knees. So I'm going to give it a 4 on QC. For accessories, I'm going to give it a 4. I think the flight stand ad is great. I think in terms of display ability, when we're talking about that shelf worthiness, I think it sets other figures, or it sets itself apart from other figures and other Supermans released before it in the Mattel line. So kudos for that, but I will ding it a little bit for the extra hands that it comes with. I think it was a miss not to include two fists as well as 2 kind of flying hands. So I'm going to give it a 4 for the accessories. All right, and packaging, going to give it a 3. I think, it's not amazing, it's not game-changing, it's pretty generic, but it's not bad either. But the other thing it's going to be in the kind of middle of the pack is, it's not super collector friendly. It's not easy to open it without kind of damaging the box in the process of doing that. So I think a 3 is pretty fair for pretty middle-of-the-road packaging. And the last category is fun factor, and I'm going to give it a 5. I think it's important to remember that while these are adult collectibles, they're still, action figures and toys at heart, and I think the fun that you have in posing and displaying these figures is incredibly important, and I think they captured the essence of Superman and why, he's appealed to generations of fans. The inclusion of the flight stand just gives so many more posing and display options. And, putting him here next to this Superpowers figure, I think just kind of shows, it belongs. It belongs up there with some of the better Supermans that have been released. So I'm giving the fun factor a 5. So the overall question, is it shelf worthy? And it is. It scores a 24, which I think is really impressive given that this is McFarlane Toys' first stab at this iconic character. I think there's a couple things that will get better over time, but I think it's a really good figure. I'd love to see an inclusion of cloth capes. I'd love to see some better hand options, but overall, I'm really, really satisfied with this figure. And at $20, I think it's a great buy. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Geek Dad Life. If you enjoyed this episode, hit like, hit subscribe, and click on that bell icon to be notified when the latest episode of Geek Dad Life drops. I'm definitely going to be looking for that Batgirl figure as well as the Batman figure, so probably more reviews to come on this line, as well as Spin Toys offering. So subscribe and be on the lookout for those videos. Until next time, hasta luego, and goodbye.